do otherwise. I've found myself in places I would not have found myself. And one of those places was at the James Creek Cider House. It is run by friends of mine, people that I've known and for 4 or 5 years now. But just I've never taken the drive out there, frankly. And I did a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago by now, and found myself in the back room taking a tour, being given by Anne Marie and by David of this beautiful business that's being grown here in Moore County. And just to see not only their love of the business, but also their love of the product that they're producing, but the love of their customers, their love of their staff. Just it was amazing to me. And I wanted to share that with all of us. I wanted to share that passion for taking God's resources, whether it's the sunshine and the rain, whether it's labor, intelligence, initiative, all of these resources that God has given to us, and to turn them into something tangible in this world is just remarkable. Now, what they're turning God's love, God's gifts into is bottles of cider. We have the opportunity to turn these things into other tangible reflections of God's love, whether the Eucharist or music or et cetera, et cetera. So we were out in their garden, in their orchard a couple of weeks ago, and took a tour. And this video is a tour of some of their tasting notes. Now, the Thorntons are on the call. They're waving at us. There's an item that many of you have that they did not taste. We sort of forgot about it. In fact, it was on the floor. There was no reason for us to have forgotten about it. But the sweet cider, the non-alcoholic cider, if at the end of the video, you two would be so kind as to share a little bit of a story about that, I would really appreciate that as well. But I think that Elizabeth is going to show us the video of our trip out to the orchard.
I am. Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen, but in case someone is not able to watch that way or to hear it, because this is Zoom, I've put the link to the YouTube link in the chat box. So that's your backup method if you're not able to see it here. So I'm going to share this now. And can you guys hear that?
Enjoyed a harvest so bountiful that he was unable.
We can hear it now.
No, it went again.
Elizabeth, we can't hear it when you mute your screen.
Harvest and harvest festivals are not just historical notes. They're part of our calendar and part of our culture. This is a resonant time of year in which we are particularly attuned to themes of God's provision, abundance, and gratitude. Harvest festivals are community celebrations of God's gift, times for sharing God's gifts. The theme of sharing the harvest is woven throughout the Bible. Think about the parable of the rich fool. Jesus told the story of the farmer who enjoyed a harvest so bountiful that he was unable to store all his grain and decided to build additional storage barns. Jesus condemned the farmer because he thought only of his own material bounty. Had he been willing to share some of his abundance with his less fortunate neighbors, Jesus taught, he would have been rich in the sight of God. Today, We celebrate our bounty, and we ask you to share your abundance. Thank you for joining our brothers and sisters for our virtual gathering.
Hi, this is John. A couple of weeks ago, a number of us were privileged to go to the James Creek orchards, where we met with David and Anne Marie Thornton, who own the orchards and who own the James Creek Cider House. To see their love for God's creation, to see their love for the sunshine, for tree, for rain, to see how they take these gifts of God and transform them into something new, into bottles of cider that then they can share with their friends, was transformative. I've known the two of them for, 5 years now. But to see this part of their lives brought me closer to them and closer to God. I hope that this experience at their orchards will help you come to appreciate them, their ministry of hospitality, but especially to appreciate God and God's love and God's providence for all of us. Thanks again for joining us. I'm sure we'll have a great time together.
Good morning. We're David and Anne Marie Thornton, and we run the James Creek Orchards and the James Creek Cider House. Today we're going to be celebrating the bounty of our harvest with some fresh apples off the trees and an introduction to some of our ciders.
Yeah. Want me to start with a little
Sure.
Mighty Hunter? So we grow about 65, 70 different kinds of apples, and most of them find their way into our cider. We also source apples from the Brushy Mountains and a few from Hendersonville. This Stargazer Mighty Hunter is it's made with Stamen Winesap apples, which is a really great old Southern apple. One of our favorites. We named this cider Mighty Hunter, really after my uncle, who was a lover of the night sky and taught his kids and nieces and nephews lots about the night sky. Orion rises about midnight in October, which is his birthday, so we named this cider for him because October is when lots of really great apples start ripening.
That's right.
This cider is semi-dry. It has a really nice acidity to it, and it's great to pair with foods or drink on its own.
So the cider house philosophy for us means using only harvest-based cider. We like to use North Carolina fruit or fruit from select orchardists that we know in other parts of the country to make some interesting ciders. But these ciders are only from North Carolina fruit, either our own or neighbors of ours, extending up to the mountains, up to the Brushy Mountains. We don't put any additives into the ciders. There's no added sugar. There are no other adjustments. We hit these flavor marks by blending different fermentations together, so that this is truly just fruit of the tree.
This is a stamen right here.
That is a Stamen Winesap apple.
That's what it looks like.
So
It's great for eating too.
now we've designed these ciders to pair well with food. Many of our ciders are a little more dry than your average grocery store cider, but that helps them pair nicely with food. If you like things a little sweeter, the ciders we're going to taste in just a moment are a little bit more sweet than the Mighty Hunter. The Mighty Hunter tends to be a little more crisp. So there are lovely yeasty notes on this. This has a distinctively cidery smell, which is a very pleasant smell. And notes of baked apple. There's certainly some tartness there, and just a wee hint of residual sugar left from the fermentation.
I think it's fun to talk about apples at harvest time because cider making, which we do, is one way of preserving apples, and especially in North Carolina, apples ripen really from June all the way through November. But people with subsistence farms would have eaten apples every day, all year long, in different forms, in dried apples or applesauce, or frying up apples for breakfast, and of course cider as well. So
That's right.
it's a fun way of preserving the harvest. All right, you ready to move on to Big Dipper?
We'll move on
All
to
right,
Big Dipper.
here. I don't
And
do that
I'll let
very
you-
often, but.
I'll let you lead the charge on the Big Dipper.
All right, well, this is Big Dipper. Big Dipper is just slightly sweeter than Mighty Hunter, obviously named for the old Big Dipper. This cider is often made with Gold Rush apples, which is a modern apple that ripens in October, and sometimes with pink ladies, another modern kind of dessert eating apple that ripens in November. And we make this cider to be just a little bit sweeter than Mighty Hunter for people who enjoy that. And it does have a distinct profile.
Yes, it does. This cider is different tasting and certainly different. It has different aromas. This is a little more crisp, a little more floral, just different fermentations blended together. And then a little more residual sugar for people who like a little bit of a sweeter beverage.
Yeah, and it's creamier, not maybe quite as acidic as the Mighty Hunter. So
Yeah, that's correct.
Mighty Hunter often we eat with, I don't know, barbecue,
Hard cheeses.
hard cheeses, things like that. Big Dipper, maybe just to sort of sip in the early evening and with
Or pulled
meals.
pork. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Sure. So it will cut through a pepper. So spicy stuff, a little sweetness next to it can be very tasty.
Yeah, and this has a little tropical fruit note on it, which is kind of fun. A little like maybe papaya. It's really interesting to get all these different aromas and flavors from just apples and see kind of how they express themselves.
And
a lot of fun.
it does sound funny to think that something fermented from apples or even from a grape can have all these aromas, but it's a part of the fermentation process. The yeast produce these different fruity and floral esters, and it really can make the beverage more interesting if you're true to the fermentation.
All right,
So
so
good.
yeah, move on to Beehive Ginger. So we
Very good for the orchard, by the way.
we try not to take ourselves too seriously. So we like to produce 100% apple ciders, and then we also have fun blending in other fruits. And for this one, we blend in honey and ginger. So honey, none of the other. This one maybe has a little sugar in it. It's unusual for us to use sugar or
to add
sweetener,
something sweet.
but sometimes people enjoy drinking something a little bit sweeter, and so we reach for honey, and this one has been a lot of fun. So with the ginger, it's got kind of a sweet, spicy thing going on, so it's fairly balanced. And when you sniff it, you get that warm honey aroma right away. So I think this is a very inviting kind of approachable cider.
Yeah, very much.
And ginger, of course.
To pair this, it's wonderful with fish. It's wonderful with sushi, actually, just like ginger comes on your plate. And it has enough sweetness to cut through some pepper as well. So this pairs nicely with spicy foods.
Yeah, this
Thai
one
food,
is,
Chinese food,
yeah, it's very good with Thai.
right?
Yeah, it's very popular. We had started it as a seasonal, but we've been working hard to get North Carolina wildflower honey all year and keep it around.
And occasionally we get to use the honey from our own orchards because we do have beekeepers come to bring us bees for pollination. And so there are some local beekeepers that we can buy some honey from.
Okay.
All right, you want to toss that?
Yeah. And the last one is our winter solstice, which we make for the winter time. So this one is kind of more of a sweet dessert cider. It does have a little sugar in it. It also has a little cinnamon and nutmeg in it. It's kind of in the tradition of a warm winter spiced cider. And yeah, sometimes I like it with dessert or instead of dessert, just kind of sip this by the fire.
Right, it's a lovely winter warmer. This was also aged in American oak barrels. And so you get spicy notes from those barrels. American oak in particular likes to lend notes of coconut and vanilla. And so you'll capture those and the oak itself on the nose, which is a lot of fun. And that'll really come out as it warms up a little in your hand. And then the spices are very, very subtle. but they're there. Bread pudding is what it reminds me a little bit of a bread pudding. There's some raisiny or date-like notes in there, and that's kind of fun.
Yeah, or a pecan pie. With pecan pie.
But not that sweet.
No, I like drinking it with pecan pie.
Oh, yeah, it does.
But it does have a bit of a nutty character to it.
Yeah,
It's sort of fun.
I agree. So, at our orchard here, we grow many different heirloom apples from North Carolina. We've arrayed a few of them on the table right now, and they come in all colors and shapes and sizes. So from a bright gold, that's a Grimes Golden, which is a parent of Golden Delicious, all the way down to a tiny little Hughes Crab, which makes a delicious cider. I want you guys to take a little bite of these. That is a Roxbury russet.
See how knobby it is?
And russeted.
Yeah. If you're familiar with grocery store apples, you don't realize that apples come in so many shades of mustard and brown with these tough skins that are great for tannins and cider making. Is this a wine
Virginia wine
sap?
sap.
Yeah, this is an old-fashioned wine sap. So these guys are cousins. John was asking about naming conventions, and sometimes they're all about naming it for somebody's favorite. But if an apple is a sport of another one or they're related, often you'll see those names intertwined that way.
And many of the old-timey apples were named for their ability to keep or when they would ripen. So we have Terry Winters down in the orchard, which is a late ripening apple, and they even have a little frosty bloom on. They're small, but they have a little frosty bloom on them all during the fall. They won't ripen until November. Johnson's Keeper was named because you could throw it in the root cellar and it would still be crunchy in February. Arkansas Blacks are a favorite. There's some little Arkansas Black in some of these ciders. Those are crunchy apples that last all through the fall and into the winter. They keep very well.
Even better after they're kept. Right?
Yeah, they are actually a little easier to eat after they've been stored for a little bit. So we have a lovely harvest this year. We've been very lucky, very blessed.
Thank you guys so much. I have loved this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Your property is beautiful. Your apples are delicious, and your cider really distills the essence of this place, as well as your love and creativity. And putting that into a bottle and being able to replicate that time and again, hundreds of bottles at a time, it's just amazing to me. I think that's fantastic.
Wow.
So thank you
Well,
very,
thank
very
you.
much.
You reminded me of one of the things, we were talking earlier about what fun it is to share apples with people and cider too. It's always fun to understand that the cider goes off to other people's homes and becomes part of their celebrations and fun times. And it's always fun to hear about that from folks and share it that way.
Oh, that's a remarkable. Your apples come from this dirt to birthday parties, to wedding celebrations, to people sitting by the fire with their spouses, to family celebrations across North Carolina. That must be remarkable to be able to share that with folks. So
I think that's what's the most fun. Is that and sharing a love for apples and talking to people about them.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, David and Anne-Marie. I think we might, John, have some questions.
So before we get to questions, I have a question. We did have a bottle of the sweet cider, the non-alcoholic cider, with us when we shot that. However, for whatever reason, we completely spaced it. Could y'all talk a little bit about your relationship with that press and with that orchardman and sort of what that's all about?
Absolutely. First of all, let me say thank you for the opportunity to participate in your stewardship program. And the concept of bounty is very close to our hearts. And I feel like it's an anchoring thought and philosophy when we're in such turbulent times, to echo what Stephen later said. So we appreciate that very much. We maintain a number of relationships with other apple growers. And from many of those growers, we've learned quite a few skills as we've stumbled along in our orcharding adventure. One of the growers that we admire quite a bit is up in the Brushy Mountains, and he he and his family, this family's been there for 5 generations, I think, growing a variety of old-timey and modern apples, and they love to press for juice. It gives them an outlet for apples that aren't the shiny perfect that they can market at the grocery store. And so we do purchase fresh juice from the Perry Low orchards, and some of you will have that in your basket. This, I believe, is a press of Honeycrisp, and yeah, and it's a delightful cider. In fact, Anne Marie and I poured a little for us. We would call this apple juice. Cider probably is better described as hard cider, although the nomenclature changes depending on where you are in the country. So I think that this has a beautiful floral aroma. It's just so fresh, and you really get a nice fresh apple off of this. And Honeycrisp has a little acidity and a little tartness that's fun and offsets the sweetness. So that I think this is a delightful and light. It's not too heavy or syrupy. This is a lovely fresh pressed juice that takes you right out to the orchard, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's nice and light. It's sweet. It's fun to drink. It's nice to enjoy cider in this form every now and then.
Absolutely.
And this is definitely exactly how we get started when we decide to ferment a juice.
That's right.
So this is where it begins. You can hold it right here, or you can ferment it and enjoy it a different way. But yeah, they're a wonderful family. They've been great to get to know.
So once again, if y'all have any questions, you can type them into the chat box, and I'll relay them on. I have a question. Could David and Anne Marie talk about the Prowling Peach Cider?
Sure.
Yeah, Prowling Peach is named for Leo, because great peaches ripen in July, and Prowling Peach is a blend of ciders, and then we add fresh pressed peaches. So we cut up our peaches, and sometimes some from Kent Chapel or other Moore County growers.
Well, we bought ours.
Crush them up, juice them, and blend a little of that juice into the cider to give just a really nice aroma and some fruity sweetness. It's one of our favorites. One of the very first ciders that we made. Is we grow peaches, and it just seems like a very Moore County thing to put peaches and apples together in that way.
And
So do you ferment the two juices together, or do you add the peach towards the end of the fermentation process?
in this case, we add the peach at the end of the fermentation process so that peach juice does not ferment. And that way it gives you a much more fresh aroma than you might otherwise have. In some of our ciders, our fruit-based ciders, all of our fruit-based ciders are harvest-based. Sometimes we do ferment the primary juice, like with blueberries or with muscadines, because we like the wine that comes from those juices. Peach wine is, I think, is a challenging beverage unless you've added quite a bit of sugar, and we prefer not to add sugar. So, we really just like to adjust the blend of apples to complement the peaches and not overwhelm them. And we call it Prowling Peach because it's not a Jolly Rancher. You have to kind of look for the peach in there a little bit, but it adds a complexity. And then when you find it, you go, I get it. There's the fresh peach. We also make a bourbon barrel aged cider that we blend peach with as well. And that gives it almost more of a little peach pie note because of the spices that come from the barrels.
So these questions are just going to be in order. I have a question from Virginia. What temperature is best for drinking cider? Do you refrigerate it? Do you drink it at room temperature?
Yeah, but we usually refrigerate it and drink it cold. Some of the ciders will change and release more aromas as they warm up. There is a school of thought where people serve cider maybe more about 45 degrees, but that's complicated, and we just put it in the refrigerator.
Even something like Mighty Hunter that might be a little more tannic and that might be a little more. Yeah, okay.
I enjoy the way it changes in the glass as it warms up. So if you start with chili, you will taste something different after it's warmed up in your hand or on the counter for a little while.
I've got a question from Stephen. I always thought that apples needed cooler climates, like in the mountains of North Carolina. What does Moore County's climate mean for your apples and your orchard?
That's a great question. And it's very astute. Apples, it's a challenge to grow apples in a warmer climate because they're a little bit more susceptible to pestilence. And yet, there are hundreds of apples that our forebears grew for centuries in this climate. And every farm across the South had an apple tree or two or three that would endure. And so there are a number of hardy, fairly disease-resistant old-timey apples. They have thicker skins. They may be a little more bitter, which actually makes them wonderful for cider making. And then apples behave quite a bit like grapes. So if you picture, I'll use a Pinot Noir as an example. A Burgundy wine is a Pinot Noir grape grown in a northern continental climate where it's cold. And those Burgundy wines tend to be tart and not fruity. And a little bit sharp and dry. And if you take the same grape out of Sonoma in the Russian River, it is jammy, fruity, sometimes sweeter, higher in alcohol because there's more sugar in those grapes in the warmer climate. And what we find is that the apples we grow on our farm in Moore County, 2 orchards in Moore County, tend to be sweeter and have a little more tannin. The same apple grown in the mountains, which is really a change from USDA zone 7B or zone 8 to zone 6 or 5B, much colder climate. Those apples don't develop the high sugar content. The hard cider we make from them tends to have a lower alcohol level because of that, and it tends to be a little higher in acidity. So that should roughly answer the question, I hope.
I've got a question, I think is from Edie. Are any ciders not fermented in oak barrels? And that's a really, that's a nice lead into the history of cider making, it seems to me.
Let me take that.
Yeah, actually, we have only just begun fermenting cider in barrels. Usually we ferment in either stainless or a special like high density polyethylene, a plastic basically. Small barrel kind of thing. But traditionally, ciders were absolutely fermented in barrels, and we've started acquiring barrels, and we're going to be moving in that direction. Barrels or wood is permeable to oxygen, and that permeability and extra oxygen to the cider is really beneficial when things are fermenting because yeast need oxygen and then give off CO2. And as the cider ages, that also adds a certain flavor profile that's really nice. Being in stainless tends to lend kind of different aromas to the cider, preserves a lot of kind of the fresh apple character, and being in the barrel gives it more kind of transformation and aging. So we've been experimenting with both those things and are enjoying that quite a bit. And you'll see new ciders coming out from us that have been aged in oak or fermented in oak as well.
So two questions from Mary Lou. The first is, when are you open?
We are open Thursdays through Sundays. And on, you know the
Yeah,
starting hours.
So Thursday we're 4 in the afternoon till 9. Friday and Saturday we're 1 to 9, and Sundays we're 1 to 6. When COVID started, we also said, hey, if you want to swing by and get bottles, just give us a call and we'll come out and meet you. But for pouring a glass of cider, that's just Thursday to Sunday.
And I'm going to point out that for those of y'all who haven't taken a trip out to the cider mill, most of it is outside. I mean, not the production, but tables are outside. Games like cornhole are outside. Oftentimes you guys will have a food truck show up, et cetera, et cetera. So you can go out with yourself, maybe meet another couple who's in your COVID pod and really make a afternoon of it. And truly an afternoon, y'all shut down well before, late. So it's really a lovely family-oriented occasion, it seems to me at least. So thank y'all for that part of your business too. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Mary Lou also asked a question. Could you remind us the name of the cider with the honey and ginger?
It's a beehive. It's beehive ginger is what we call it. And most of them are named for the stars. There's a cluster of stars called the beehive cluster. So beehive ginger has honey and ginger.
And I will share a little secret with this crowd that we usually make people figure out on their own. But if you follow our fruit seasonal ciders, we only make them when the fruit is ripe. They generally only last about 4 to 6 weeks before they're all bought up and sold out. But if you look carefully, the constellation on the label is what's rising or up in the sky when that fruit gets harvested. So for strawberries, the Gemini are up. For peach, Leo the lion is up in summertime. For the muscadine, where Sagittarius is up, and that's how he got his name Crossbow. So you'll see various constellations across the bottle labels as the year rolls on, and those reflect what we see in our orchards when we come in at night after working for the day. We love the night sky, and the firmament, I think, is a constant reminder of how these seasons wax and wane, and the sense of renewal and the bounty that we get to experience. It's important to us.
Related to that, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Armicia is asking, is there a cider associated with Scorpio?
Not yet.
David is a Scorpio, so we've batted around ideas, but we don't have one just yet.
It's coming along.
Back to the barrels. Susan is asking, do you use new barrels or previous used barrels, or perhaps even barrels from other processes?
Yeah, okay. We generally, we have never used a new barrel, and my thought process on this is twofold. Number one, they're wicked expensive, all right? But number two, new barrels are charred, and hard cider is an evanescent beverage with a lot of delicate flavors, and I think they would be overwhelmed by the char on a new barrel. I just don't think they can stand up to it the way a Cabernet Sauvignon could, for example, and even Chardonnays, which are barrel aged, as a white wine. Usually, they will only do light toast on those barrels. So we do use barrels that have been previously used to temper that charring. We want some of that, but not enough to overwhelm the flavor of the cider. We do use once used bourbon barrels. We use previously used brandy barrels. We just got in some French oak Pinot Noir barrels from California that I'm very excited about. We love that. We use, for fermentations and for maturation, we use French oak barrels from Italy as well. Big puncheons, 500-liter puncheons that are French oak. And these barrels are 10 years old, sometimes older. This doesn't bother us because let's face it, people have been using barrels for wine and cider for hundreds and hundreds of years. There must be something good about those barrels, right? And the fact that they last makes them a really fun tool in our toolbox for production and for subtly modifying the flavors that come out of our finished product.
Henry wants to know if you ever sell simply the apples, the seasonal apples.
We do. There's a tug of war between Anne-Marie and myself. I like all the apples to go into the press to make cider with. So we have more fun to play with. But Anne-Marie runs a thriving farmer's market in Carborough in Chapel Hill. And so I'll let her talk about her experiences there.
Yeah, so we joke the pretty apples get sold for fresh eating, and then the funny looking ones go into the cider. And Dave thinks everything's funny looking, so this is an issue that we have rolling on.
Strict standards.
But yes, if you come up to the cider house, we have apples there, and you can buy those. I think right now we have Stamen wine saps and some galas and some Golden Delicious and regular wine saps.
So, y'all have been in business for a few years, but y'all have been in town for a little bit of time, and David has another business that he operates here in town that he might want to talk about, or that he's associated with, I guess I should say. How did y'all get into this? And David, go ahead and talk about your other business real quick.
I practice in pulmonary critical care medicine, which many of you know already, and I've been practicing at the Pinehurst Medical Clinic since we moved here in '02. We moved here after I returned from my second tour in Afghanistan. We fell in love with this area. We loved it here, and really, literally put down roots here now, haven't we? So I love my practice of medicine. And I have no desire to leave it. It's an integral part of who I am. And the orchards offer me a bit of a sanctuary from that. So, when I can be out in the trees in the sunshine with the dogs, it's a peaceful way for me to meditate on some of the other things that are going on. And as Stephen alluded to earlier, the storms and calamities of 2020 in particular have been stressful for healthcare providers and stressful to see so many patients suffering, especially patients who are disenfranchised from our system and have difficulty getting access to healthcare. And to temper that frustration for me, sometimes work in the orchard and work in the cider house, quite honestly, is a nice foil that helps me relax. Anne-Marie and I both really loved the idea of shepherding our land so that it could produce something tangible and really let our farm grow. It's been a real pleasure to learn. There's been a lot of learning involved, I dare say. So what do you think, sweetheart?
Yeah, I don't know. You said that all pretty well. We fell in love with the area, and then I think we just kind of wanted to get closer to it. And so enjoying the roll of the seasons, having moved here from 10 years in Texas, and then just putting plants in the ground and kind of really living in that cycle every year has been quite wonderful.
So I'm going to ask a final question, and then I think we might want to wrap up very quickly. The first is, why are you calling a cider house in Cameron James Creek?
Well, our farm backs up to the James Creek. Probably some of you know that the James Creek is the border between Moore County and Fort Bragg. And so our farm backs up to Fort Bragg. And we started planting apple trees there on our farm in '09, and just decided that we would name the orchard after the creek. And we didn't acquire the Cameron property until about 4 or 5 years later. But we still really liked that name and that place and its tie to our home. So even though we're near the Crane Creek, we call it James Creek Cider House. Mm-hmm. It kind of, I think, evokes, small, little known rural places in North Carolina. And since we grow kind of little known apples, it seemed fitting.
First off, I want to say to the Thorntons, thank you guys so much for your generosity of spirit and time. It has been remarkable.
Thank you.
It's truly been a wonderful gift to get to share in this process a little bit with y'all. Our next steps, we do have some cider left at the church. If you haven't picked up a bottle yet, please do so. And then we will get to choose whether or not we use it for future parties, perhaps a party when we get back together again, or something else. My understanding is I'm going to throw this to Stephen later, just to sort of talk about the next steps of the stewardship process, and then we will be done with this call.
Thank you. So you will soon receive a pledge card in the mail. And we hope that you will, after prayerful consideration, return it to us and help us as we go forward into 2021, and hope that we will, with your support and with God's help, be able to continue our work here in Moore County and abroad, both for our parish and for those whom we serve. We depend upon your help, and we humbly ask you to consider it with prayer and thought, and we thank you.
Thank you guys so very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Thank you.
Hey there.
Thank you.
How you doing, Mary Lou?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'll be out there. I'm going to Maine, but I'm coming afterwards.
All right, that's great.
Good. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Like that hat.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
You know where I got that from?
I do. It's good to see you all. Thank you.
Oh, that's great.
He said there was a little shine on his head, so he thought that would help.
I know the feeling.
You don't know the feeling.
Thank you all very much. If anybody's bold enough to say they saw us on this call, when they see us up at the Cider House, we'll give you a tour in the back. All right.
Great tour.
Thanksgiving weekend.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Take care.